I am joined by young adult author Mark Oshiro. Hello.
Hello, welcome.
And welcome to you, sir.
Welcoming you to your own interview. I love it.
We're both welcome here.
We are I'm very excited to be back here in California. It's great.
Yeah, and you just had your debut book published. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Can you tell us about Anger is a Gift?
Yeah, sure. So Anger is a Gift is a story about a group of teenagers who stage a walkout at their high school when one of their friends is injured by a metal detector. It is part autobiographical. I wanted to write a high school that looked a lot like my own. It wasn't until I got to college that I realized having a resource officer and having disciplinary procedures manned by police officers was not normal in this country.
Can you explain what a resource officer is for people who don't know?
And so it's been very interesting, going on tour, meeting teens and meeting adults and talking about this book, because a lot of them are like, where did you get the idea for this resource officer who's on this campus? And I was like, I modeled him in every way over the one that I had on my own campus. And the most common response I get is, oh, they're real. I thought you just made that up for the story. And I was like, no, that's real. Yeah. And it's been very fascinating to see. Some people read the book and they will be like, oh, a resource officer, which is a police officer who is stationed on campus and generally handles most of the disciplinary stuff at the school. They will tell me, I've never seen one in a book before, which is, I don't know. There's this huge conversation about representation in young adult literature. And one of the things that's been very interesting is getting to meet kids who tell me, I see myself in this school environment. I've never seen my high school represented in a book. So it's been interesting. I don't know. It's weird putting yourself into a book and your experience, and then people react to it and then feel like they know you super well, which they do, because it's, I was very honest in this book. So.
Cool. Well, and I read that it started out as a science fiction novel.
It did.
So tell me about the evolution from that into what it became.
Yeah. So I'm a speculative fiction guy. That's what I grew up reading and watching and being obsessed with, and reading fan fiction about a lot of the genre stuff. And so I had always planned that my first book was going to be some, either fantasy or science fiction or whatnot. So when I first got the idea, and the whole book, by the way, is a reaction to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Actually, that is what initially inspired the kernel of an idea that became the book. It just sort of naturally fell into this science fiction story. And it was initially a book about how technology can be used to control people. And while the bones of basically these two books are the same, the original book was it was a science fiction thriller that sort of led into this dystopian world. And when I was querying the book and trying to find a literary agent, I got a lot of rejections over the course of 2 years. And the first, what's called a rewrite and resubmit, which is when an agent is like, I like this book, but here are things I think you need to address. If you can address them, send it back, and I'll give it a second pass. And he told me, I love this character. I love his voice. We don't have very many young adult books that are dealing with things like police brutality and violence in high schools. His narration is so searing and so important. You also wrote a science fiction book and sort of stuck it down on top of it, and it's kind of smashing everything together. Write one of those books and send me only that one. Which is, by the way, very difficult feedback to get at first. Like, I just basically laid on the couch for a week and didn't breathe and was just like, that's a lot. I don't want to do that. That's so much work. But I ended up rewriting the outline, and my test was I was going to rewrite one as a contemporary book and one as a science fiction book. And whichever outline felt closest to my heart and the one that I felt the most passion for was going to be the version I wrote. And so I wrote the contemporary one first because I was like, I don't write contemporary. This will be easy, and I know it'll be terrible. And never bothered with the science fiction one because it felt so right. And I was like, oh my God, he was right. He was right. This feedback is great. So it ended up turning into a contemporary book. There's still a lot of science in it. And so I've had science fiction fans come up to me and tell me that even though they know it's contemporary and all the technology in it is real, they really liked it as a science fiction fan because it almost felt like sci-fi light. Because science and technology still plays a part in it. It's just the metal detector and the issues of how police forces in the United States use technology in their day-to-day lives. That stuff is still very real, but it has that almost like science fiction flavor, if that makes sense. So that being said, I'm really excited that I'm writing for, Tortine because they told me I can write in any genre from here on out. So my next book is very, very genre I'm very excited about it.
I'm excited about it too.
Cool.
So young adult books are not just read by young adult
No.
readers.
No.
And I'm curious, I mean, this book hasn't been out in the world that long, but do you feel like the reaction from like teen readers is different at all from the reaction for adult readers? Or does it feel like maybe the reaction splits along like different demographic lines?
Both. I tend to enjoy talking to teen readers because there's sort of a purity in the reactions. So, the book came out on May 22nd, and I immediately went on tour. And I had one of my first school visits on this tour. And these kids will say the first thing that comes to their mind. And it's so genuine and pure. But I had this kid who was like, "How long is your book?" I had not even introduced myself. I had walked into the classroom, put the book down. And he was like, "How long's your book?" And I was like, "It's pretty long. It's a long book." And he's like, "How many pages?" And I was like, 463. And he was like, "I only read books that are 200 pages or less, so write a 200-page book and I'll read that." And I was like, "Okay, hi, my name's Mark. Let's start there." But he was just like, this is the thing that I like. What? And by the way, he said that, and I was like, I'm going to write a middle grade book for that kid. That's like a 200-page book. But so I think one of the other things that's been really striking about the reactions from teenagers versus adults is that so many of the teens are saying, we're not used to stories like this. Most of my school visits have been in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Harlem, and Oakland. So I'm mostly speaking to brown and black kids about an issue that is very near and dear to them. I did a school visit in the Bronx where I had to go through a metal detector in order to do my presentation to them. So when I pitched the book to them, and just as I did to you and told you what it was about, every eye in that classroom was like, "What? Excuse me? What did you just say?" And immediately I had their attention because they're like, "Wait, you can write a book about that?" And so I had another kid raise their hand in that classroom and say, "Do the cops win in the end?" And I was like, "Well, spoilers, I'm not going to tell you that." And he's like, "No, I need to know." And I was like, that's a reaction that I would not and have not gotten from an adult, because these kids are living that reality all the time and they don't want to read a book where they lose in the end. And I did end up telling him, I'm not going to tell all of you spoilers, but I did end up pulling him aside and being like, "Here's what happens." And he's like, "Okay, cool. I just need to know, So as far as adults, the reaction that I'm getting from adults that I don't get from kids is there are a lot of parents in the book who actually get space, and it's pretty rare in YA to have major characters who are the parents, because usually they're dead, missing, a ghost, all three. I don't know. Yeah, all of these things at the same time. And I get why, because YA fiction is about teens finding power and teens finding their own way to do things and solving problems without adults. And I very much wanted to write a book where the main character Moss is trying to find these solutions, but what if he had a parent who he was not antagonistic with? And so a lot of what I'm getting from adult readers is, I have not read a YA book where there is an extremely supportive parent. Moss's best friend Esperanza is a transracial adoptee like me. So she has two white parents, and she was adopted after her parents were taken away by the government. And so I had a white parent come up to me at an event in one of my cities and said, "Your book made me very uncomfortable because me and my partner have an adopted Latina daughter, and I have never read a book with these parents and with parents like this before." So it was very rewarding, because I was like, I relate to so much of this, but you talk so much about what can make that relationship uncomfortable. And then it made me uncomfortable. And now I need to go home and have like a very important conversation with my daughter to let her know that we support her and that we would never be these kind of people. And it was weird because they walked away and I was like, "Thank you. That's really good feedback, I guess." And then I was like, I think I just ruined their lives. Like, I don't know which wasn't my intent, but it's interesting that a lot of adults come at it, and the people they're gravitating to are the adult characters versus the teenage ones. So, and then if you go with demographics, like, my main character is gay, so I tend to have, the people who are most, I guess, appreciative of the book are young queer teenagers who are like, "Thank you for writing a book with an openly queer teenager who it doesn't deal with homophobia and doesn't deal with parents who don't accept them." So it just, everyone comes to a book with their own history. And so it has been really fascinating to see what people take away from it. Yeah.
Cool. So it's kind of nice that we're talking at Comic-Con, because I feel like you have your own like Comic-Con origin story.
Oh my God.
Where
It is literally a Comic-Con origin story. This is like, I'm surprised I haven't become a superhero because it's that close.
Please tell it.
Oh my God. So for next month is 9 years since I started this weird little project that has become my life. I run a series of blogs that is referred to as the Mark Does Stuff universe, which is Mark Reads and Mark Watches, where I read and watch things unspoiled, film myself while doing so, and then write sort of like these analytical reviews talking about the things that went on with it, telling personal stories, but also trying to figure out what's going on. Because I think that, especially with serialized fiction, which you get a lot in speculative fiction, it is really fun to try to figure out what is happening in a story and seeing the pieces fall into place. I started it on a bet here 9 years ago. I used to live in Los Angeles, and I had an editor who sent me to Comic-Con, but said the only way I could be allowed to go and cover what I wanted is if I attended the panel for Twilight. So this was like the height of the Twilight obsession. I think it was when New Moon came out that year. And so
this was my first Comic-Con.
Was that year.
That
was
year.
The year. So that was also the year people started lining up outside Hall H for the first time, like hours. Actually, I want to say it was the day before. So, excuse me, I was like, no, why would I do this? And then it was like free trip to San Diego to Comic-Con. Yes, of course I'll do it. Like, it'll be 2 hours out of my life. It was not, by the way. It was like 16 hours out of my life because I had to get in line. I got here on Wednesday and people were already lined up. And so I had to get in line at like 4 a.m. on the day of the panel. And what ended up happening was I didn't really do what I was assigned to do, which was cover the panel. Because, and I'm sure you relate to this too. If you're in that room, sort of everyone gets the same information. So the best you can do is if you have really good photos, if you write a really good write-up. I feel like that's the only real way to stand out. So I was in line for Hall H with all of these Twilight fans who were saying things like, this is the best book series I've ever read. I think that this romance has made my relationship with my husband better. And like just these like out of this world things. So when I got back home, I had ended up doing this feature on only the people in the line and interviewing them and being like, why do you like this? And why are you here so early? And not in a condescending way. I was genuinely like, why are you here? And my editor loved it and was like, I'm so glad you did this, and ended up doing better than my actual Twilight coverage. So it was like, it ended up working out. But as I was leaving his office, he made this like offhand comment and was like, it'd be really funny if you read Twilight and wrote about it. I'd just love to get your take on it. And I was like, that's a terrible idea. And then a few days later, I made this blog as a joke for my office mates called Mark Reads Twilight. And because I had a full-time job, I only read one chapter a day because it was all I had time for. And, it was just me trying to understand this book and being snarky and then just downright angry as the series went on. And it was never supposed to be a thing. And the whole internet found it. And I ended up reading all the Twilight books somehow. But it was all because of Comic-Con, because of this culture, and because the way that fandoms sort of can change like the whole cultural landscape. Because now Hall H has its own Twitter account, which is really funny. I found it yesterday. I didn't realize it was an account just for the line. Yeah. But like that is something that those Twilight fans, and like say what you will about Twilight, I said a lot about Twilight. That series changed like young adult literature, and we got so many more people to read. It changed movie adaptations. It changed movie soundtracks. Because look, I don't care what anyone says. That first movie soundtrack is one of the best ever. That's one of the best Paramore songs ever. Anyway, I really like Decode. It's like my favorite. It's my jam. So like it's interesting how that property changed so many lives, even if you didn't like it. Because I ultimately didn't like Twilight, but I can't deny it changed my whole life. And this blog that I started as a joke then became a hobby and is now my full-time job. And I think I've reviewed hundreds of books and TV shows at this point, and life is weird. Like, have you ever met someone in an airport and like, what do you do? And you're like, I don't know how to describe my job. Like, I'm a giant nerd on the internet and people pay me for it.
Yeah,
it's weird.
The follow-up question to that is always, so do you get paid for that? And I'm like, yes, this is the context of the conversation.
Yeah. Well, so once I was trying to describe it to someone in an airport, and I was like, people commission these videos. They want to see me react to their favorite part of a thing. And so they're like, so you film yourself and people give you money? And then I was like, I guess. And then there was this weird pause, and he was like, is this like a porn thing? And I was like, oh, no. It has nothing to do with that. There's no sexual element to this. And I was like, I am uncomfortable and will relearn this pitch and describe it better.
You're like, how many people were thinking that and not saying it out loud?
I'm certain it happened for years because this was like 5 years in that this happened. So I was like, wow, I'm sure I've met strangers who walked away and were like, I met a total weirdo. And I'm going to tell all my friends about them. So, but yeah, Comic-Con's very important to me because it changed my life.
Yeah, Comic-Con changes lots of lives.
Yeah, it does.
And one of the aspects of your blog is that you try to stay unspoiled.
Yes.
Has that gotten really like a lot harder over the last 9 years?
No. Actually, it's gotten easier because now you can mute terms. I've had a blocker for certain terms on Tumblr for many years, but like I was so happy when we got muted terms on Twitter. The other thing is like most people get what I'm doing and they actually don't want to spoil me. Because they love seeing me be wrong in the lead up to like a big reveal and then having that huge emotional moment of, oh, I've embarrassed myself for the last 2 months on this blog.
The dramatic irony of it all.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good example, and I'm going to use a property that's been around for like 7 million years, so like this spoiler is fine. But I remember I'd never read Lord of the Rings as a kid, and I was like, I feel like this is a formative piece of fantasy literature. I should read it, and I was going to read all the books and then watch all the movies. And so as I was reading Two Towers, I was absolutely convinced that Gollum's arc was a redemption story. And I was like, oh, he's seeding this, he's doing this here, I'm so savvy. And all of these people were just sitting there like, we don't know what to do because he keeps doubling down every new review and saying something even more embarrassing. And I remember when I got to the big thing at the end of the Two Towers and I was like, I've made a huge mistake. Like, but that's like the joy of it is like you think you know where certain things are going, and every once in a while I actually do pick up on something very early and then the reveal happens and I feel victorious because I usually don't pick up on things. I'm so in the moment that I a lot of things go over my head, but no, it really hasn't gotten hard. I think people get, people get that if you're watching something for the first time, it's just fun to not know. And I think, if anything, it's gotten easier because we have so many things out there in the world that people are reading or watching that have these huge moments in them that people are like, I just want them to be precious and innocent, and then I want to see them break. Yeah. So, like, no, I think for the most part, people are super respectful about it. Even in person, like someone will be like, oh, have you watched this? And I'll be like, oh, no, you can't. I'm going to review it later this year. You can't talk about it. And they're like, oh, cool. And they just stop. Like, they're like, oh, you precious thing. So, no.
We've like developed an etiquette of spoilers.
Yeah, which is weird. Another aspect of my life that is like in hindsight or like out of context is very bizarre. Yeah. That I basically have this giant bubble around me at all times. So it's fun though.
What are you reading and or watching right now?
Okay, so I am working my way through all of Terry Pratchett's Discworld books. I'm on book 32 of 43. I'm almost done. Well, almost done. It's still like another year and a half at this point. And I've been reading the Discworld books since 2014. So it's been a long project because there are quite a few of them. I'm just finishing up Diane Duane's Young Wizards, Feline Wizards universe as well. And I have a vague idea what I'm doing next, but I haven't told anyone. I think I might do something kind of fun. And then on Mark Watches, I just finished Alias for the first time, which was great.
I loved Alias.
There was a bunch of people like, I'm really worried it doesn't hold up. And I was like, you're all wrong. It holds up extremely well.
It was ahead of its time in a lot of ways.
Ahead of its time. And it's interesting watching that because I was a Lost fan in real time. And there are little bits of it that I'm like, oh, I see where J.J. Abrams and the writing team took this thing and made it a whole plot on Lost.
Yeah. Have you watched Felicity?
No, I think that's the only Abrams project I haven't watched yet. I heard there's also things there that...
Well, there's like a weird time travel plot in the last season, and you're like,
okay, now
J.J. Abrams.
Why do you like this? And so I finished Alias, Gallivant. I'd never watched Gallivant. It was a lot of fun. And I'm currently working my way through an anime called Steins Gate.
Oh, I haven't heard of that.
It is... Am I allowed to swear on these things? Messed up. It's super fucked up. Let me just say that. Like, immensely. It is a show about a bunch of kids who discover that they can send emails 2 days into the past. And they start doing little things to like alter their lives. Like, don't buy this cell phone. Don't do this thing. And then those things start it's basically like a domino falls over, and then it's buildings falling over. Like it is. It is an astounding show because it is a very slow burn of like they're just doing little things and they're all like really quirky characters. And then about halfway through the show, it goes from being like this slice of life comedy about time travel unto, oh, I think we ruined the world time travel. It is incredible. And I only have about 5 episodes left and I have no idea how it's going to end. And it is a wild ride. And I love that stuff. I love that it is, it's a genre thing. It's very much speculative fiction, but it's in a different medium. But you still get, there's so much of that show feels like a commentary on like common time travel motifs of like grandfather paradoxes and, can you and yourself be at the same place at the same time? And it's very fascinating and I love it.
This is the best thing about Comic-Con, getting recommendations.
Oh, I know.
I can't wait to watch that.
It's great.
Where can people find you online?
Yeah. I am located as Mark Does Stuff everywhere on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's the easiest way to find me. And then markoshiro.com is where all my author stuff is. So if you want to like find all my interviews and all my press stuff for like my young, it's weird because it's like I don't think of myself as 2 personas, but I have like this geeky side and the young adult side. And I'm very excited because in the near future they're going to finally merge and sort of be the same thing. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Cool. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you, Katie. This is great. I love it.
Yeah, we'll talk again soon.